The new piston rings, and they look like new old stock piston rings, have arrived for a 9E 15 thou oversize, narrow with a butt joint. So in this package we have 2 piston rings. We're only going to use one. We have 2 piston rings. They are identical to each other. They have the correct end gap style, sorry. So I'm going to take one of those out of this package, put the other one back in the package. Set that piston ring out of the way, actually, and I have here a piston ring compressor, which I hope will work for me. It's a 3D printed piston ring compressor. You can, I'm sure, purchase a metal piston ring compressor, which would be better because it would be smooth, very smooth on this surface here. The way this works is, using the old piston to demonstrate, the piston rings are of course installed in the grooves with the end gaps lined up where the pins are. In this case, the piston rings are stuck in the piston. Then you install the ring compressor, hold the ring compressor. In this case, I think I'm going to use some tape or maybe a rubber band to hold the compressor closed. And then as you slide the cylinder over the piston, the ring compressor just slides off the rings, and then the rings go into the cylinder. And then the ring compressor has to be removed off of the connecting rod. That's why there's a gap in it. That also allows you to compress it, of course. Now there are other styles of ring compressors for 4-stroke engines, but typically in a 4-stroke engine what you're doing is you're compressing the piston rings and then setting the piston on the cylinder and installing the piston with the connecting rod down into the cylinder and then bolting the connecting rod to the crankshaft. The 2-stroke's a little different, so the ring compressor has a gap in it, so you can take it off of the piston and connecting rod when the cylinder is in place, or at least the cylinder is down over the rings and piston. So we'll carefully take our cylinder off. I just slid it on here to hold the piston and keep everything oiled, so I'm going to rotate the piston to about bottom dead center. Carefully remove the cylinder straight up. We do not want to rotate the cylinder. We also don't want to let the piston hit anything. And our gasket should still be there. And it is. Our gasket is still there. Okay, so now to put our supports back underneath our piston. I don't know if you remember, one of the issues with the old piston was that it had a piece knocked out of it, possibly from hitting the connecting rod. So we don't want to do that to our brand new piston. We've already had enough oopses with it. So now I want to try the new rings in the cylinder, and I'll just move the camera down. Hold on for the squeaks if there might be any. So we want to try the new ring in the cylinder and check the end gap again. Check the end gap in this one. This one hasn't. We haven't checked the end gap in this one. So we want to put that in. I'm going to use the old piston, which is actually too small for the cylinder now. Manual said 8 to 12 thousandths of an inch. So we're going to try the maximum, the 12. Just make sure the end is together here. We want 12 thou. 12 thou definitely fits. And that's probably lower than the piston rings will actually get in normal use. We'll go just below the ports, measure it again. Our feeler gauge still goes through. I don't want to force this piston because it's damaged here. Our 12 thou still goes through. And actually, I'm just going to modify this piston. I'm going to modify the piston. It's where it's broken here. It's going to rub against the cylinder. I'm just going to bend that in a little bit. Oh, I broke it there. So that piston should go in a little further now. Nice and easy. Check our 12 thou. Still good. A little further. I'm going to tip this over so I can see where the ring's going to end up. That's about where the ring would end, up at the top of its travel. Gap is there. The 12 thou slides nicely between it, so the gap in that ring is large enough. We don't want it too small, or it could, as they say, pinch up in the cylinder and cause seizure. Take a little bit of the oil off of that, the cylinder, so it can't roll onto my natural floor here. Now we want to put this piston ring on. So the gap, the top ring, the pin is here, the bottom ring, the gap is here. So I should actually remove this top ring carefully. So as not to break it. And then put the bottom ring on, and the bottom ring does fit correctly in the groove. There are side clearances to measure, which I should, but I want to skip. So there's the bottom ring in the groove again, the replacement bottom ring. So from this side, we'll put the top rig in, and everything's covered in oil now, so it's nice and slippery. So the rings are in the grooves, approximately where they belong, with the gaps. Well, the gaps in the rings are located on at the pins. So now I want to get my assembly lube. Move this piston out of the way. Don't need feeler gauges. Hopefully I don't need those pliers. Oh, that's not the oil I want. There's the oil I want. I'm just going to put some oil on this piston ring compressor. So everything's slippery and hard to hang on to. Get the oil away before I knock it over. And I think actually I'm going to use a zip tie on that possibly. A zip tie isn't coming quickly to hand, so now I need something to hold that before I begin. The zip tie wouldn't be a good idea because that would actually sit above this and possibly cause that to be pushed off at an angle. Mark. So I've just taken a roll of electrical tape and made a slice in the middle of it so I can end up with a narrow strip of tape, which I will remove from the roll so I'm not fighting with it with one hand. Okay, so the piston ring compressor goes on. Compressing the rings slightly as the compressor goes on. It may require a little wiggling to get the rings, the gap of the rings exactly where they belong. We don't want to wiggle anything too much. Okay, so there, the top of the compressor is just holding that top ring. Will be when I finish. Just holding that top ring. And then we'll see if our tape will stick to this oily mess we have. Or at least stick to itself to hold this. This would be a job for possibly a second set of hands. Ring compressor slips, so I'll just raise it up. Put the ring in with my fingernail. Oh, yeah, this tape isn't going to hold. I think it is holding. Okay, so with our boards in place to hold a piston up and steady, the piston of course is on with front, facing the front of the engine, which is the exhaust port. The cylinder still has oil on it from when I attempted this before, and I want to put the cylinder on as straight as possible. So I can look down the cylinder and carefully slide. Oh, the ring compressor has come off. Yeah, so I'll need something better than that tape. I'll be right back. So actually I'm going to try a zip tie. I found a nice small one to hold the ring compressor slightly closed. I'll try this again. And maybe what I'll do is also hold the ring compressor with my fingers. So cylinder on, lined up as I can with the holes in the base of the cylinder and what the studs are going to end up on. I'm holding the ring compressor so it doesn't fall off carefully. Now it doesn't want to go. Patience, 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 eh? Open the compressor, over the rings, compress the rings. Put my retainer back on here. Try again. I think we're down over the first ring. Seems to be moving. I think, by George, we're on. And I don't see any pieces of broken piston ring out around it, so I think we're okay. So we'll take the zip tie off. We could actually we'll take our boards out here. Take our piston ring compressor out of the bore here, and continue to slide the cylinder down. Start the studs. Okay, now just carefully rotate the engine. And the rings are both in the grooves, which we can only see the rings when we look in the exhaust port. They don't come down low enough to be seen in the intake port. So our cylinder is set in place. Now nuts and washers and a wrench. I'll find those and come right back. Cylinder nuts and washers have been located in, of course, a handy little zipper bag. Make sure we have 4 washers, 4 nuts. Okay. If I recall, the nuts are a little too thick to just simply put them in place here. Put the washer in place on one. I think if I remember right, I have to lift the cylinder slightly. Yes, the nut will not fit in there. One started. Start another one. Start another one. And yes, our gasket still is in place there. These nuts too are, actually no, these nuts are chamfered on both sides, but they're marked where they were against the lock washer before, so I'm going to put them back on the same way. I'm kind of strange that way. I like to put things back exactly the way they were if I can. That nut is started, the lock washer is in place, and the nut is started. Well, those lock washers certainly do fit nicely. Cylinder. One of the reasons I left the cylinder on the engine, and I hadn't installed it even though the piston rings weren't both in place, was the gasket had sealer under it, so the cylinder held the gasket down against the sealer and hopefully made it nice and flat so we don't get any leaks when we tighten everything up. Sure we don't cross thread it the nut. No, it spins on nice and easy with a finger. Started. Washer number 4. Washer number 4 is on. The nut is marked on one side, so put that down. Loosen that one nut to lift the cylinder just enough to drop the nut in, not in the right place. And these nuts are why we took the cowl half off of there, the inner fan cover, the inner fan housing, which is also the outer chain case. And that nut is started. Might as well spin them down by hand. Now there is a torque specified for these. I do not have a torque wrench that works in this tight quarters. It would have to be a torque wrench that would go onto a crowfoot wrench, maybe. And this is the 1/4 inch British Standard wrench, which is on about what looks like about a 1/2 inch nut. Okay, that's starting to tighten. We'll hold it there. Put them all in about the same spot. And tighten them as evenly as I can. Tighten the cross pattern here. Just trying to hold the wrench in the same position and give it about the same amount of effort on each nut. You definitely don't want these nuts working loose when the engine's running. In 2-stroke, the cylinder has to be sealed against the crankcase so that as the piston goes up and creates a vacuum in the crankcase, it draws fuel in the intake instead of unfiltered air into an intake leak. We're almost as tight as we want to get those. There, I believe those are as tight as I'm going to get them with that wrench, and I believe that is as tight as they need to be. Now we can put our chain case cover back on, our outer chain case. Oh, it's just one of our wood blocks falling. So to put the cover back on, we need a washer and a nut. So there's the fan. We don't need quite yet. one nut for the fan, and you probably can't see this because the camera's too high. The other nut for the fan, a nut for the case, the cover, washer for the fan, the other washer for the better chain case. Mark. So now our chain case can go back on. I'm just going to put a little oil on that spacer. I'm sure it was oiled before, but I'm going to use the 2-stroke oil. The chain case will have 30 weight oil in it, not 2-stroke oil, but that will do for now. So we have the hardware. Again, oh, sorry. Point this down a little bit. So I oiled the adapter here, the spacer between the pinion, the sprocket, and where the fan goes. The Woodruff key is still in place. This is the stud that the cover goes over. There is a pin at the back here. This hole here in the cover and gasket locate to. The gasket still is in place. And now we're going to install the part that would have interfered with tightening those two nuts. So gasket, see there, the seal is going over the spacer. Something's in the way here. There we go. Okay, so the spacer's through the cover, the gasket. Sorry, the spacer is through the seal. That's what it needs to go through. Again, put the nut on the same way it was previously. Threads on this are slightly damaged from corrosion, so make sure I put the nut on straight. There we go, nice and easy. Now I'm going to go looking for the right wrench, the correct wrench. Have the correct wrench? I do. Carefully tighten this. Try not to damage the end of the crankshaft with the wrench as I tighten that. Now I believe I have that tight, so Woodruff key is in there. I'm going to install the fan. Making sure I watch that the Woodruff key does not get knocked out of position. I'm just going to turn the fan until the keyway in the hub lines up with the Woodruff key, and I'm watching down through here. The Woodruff key is staying in position. The washer on. Now, again, these nuts are machined so that they're chamfered on one side. So I'm going to put the chamfered side against the lock washer. I'm just going to get the right mark. This is the 7/16 wrench for this. It's probably a 3/4 inch nut. From what I've read, the wrench is sized by the thread size. So the diameter, this is not the width across the flats of the nut, but the size of the hole in the nut. Now, this nut is supposed to be torqued to a figure in the manual, which I can't think of off the top of my head. And I don't have a proper way to hold the fan. there have been suggestions made to me where with the cylinder head on you can feed a soft rope into the cylinder with the piston slightly above, or at least above, covering the exhaust port. So you feed soft rope in there, and then of course as you try to tighten the nut, it compresses the rope until the piston won't move, and then that'll hold the crankshaft and you can tighten the nut. I also got the advice to simply put a rattle gun, which is an impact gun, on the nut and tighten it. Although that doesn't give me confirmation that I'm at the specified torque. I could over tighten it, or I could leave it slightly loose, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to go with the rope method, which I can't do right now because the cylinder head is not on. I'm just going to make that snug. Put the other nut on here for safekeeping. And then we can move on to my favorite, ignition timing. So I'm going to get my dial gauge, turn this engine around, and come back. Now I'm going to set the ignition timing. The ignition point's gap has already been set. It can be set at any time. I simply rotated the crankshaft, well before the piston was installed. Just rotate the crankshaft with the ignition cam, which sticks out here between the sets of points, until the ignition cam has the points open to their furthest position. Then I measured the gap between the stationary ignition contact, the stationary point, and the movable point, and adjusted the stationary point using a loosen the lock screw, and then there's a screw with an offset head. And then I adjusted the gap between the two contacts until they were within specification, which I can't remember off the top of my head. So forward set of points, rearward set of points, forward and reverse. So the point gap is set, and of course had set, open the forward set, adjust them, rotate the engine until the reverse set was open, and set them. So the ignition, the point gap affects the quality of the spark. It affects what is called, or what I remember being called dwell from my high school days when we studied small engines and actually car engines when cars had ignition points in them. Dwell is the number of degrees of distributor shaft rotation during which the points stay closed. So although we're setting the gap, which is when they're open, that affects how long they're closed, and that affects the charge that builds up in the primary of the ignition coil. So when the point's open, there's a sufficient charge in there to collapse quickly and cause, by induction, a spark on the secondary side, which is what we want. We want the spark at the spark plug to ignite the fuel air mixture at the right time, and we want a nice hot spark. So with the gap set, now we want to set the timing, which literally means the time when the point's open relative to where the piston is. Some engines, 2 strokes, 4 strokes, actually have timing marks, so you just line up the timing marks, set the points to just open at that point as you turn the crankshaft. As far as I know, I've never seen or read anywhere where these engines are equipped with timing marks. The manual simply says that the ignition timing, the spark is supposed to occur when the piston is a certain distance before top dead center. So to measure that, I'm going to use a dial indicator, as the name implies. It's a dial, and it indicates travel as this plunger is moved. The needle moves, and it's marked in thousandths of an inch. And to hold that steady, we're going to use a magnetic stand. So I'm just going to reposition the camera, set up the dial indicator, and set it to top dead center. The magnetic base is secured to the top of the cylinder. I put it as steady as I could, lowered the arms here, and secured the dial indicator as low as I could, because I not only want to find top dead center, I want to find where the piston, I want to be able to measure the piston when it's at the point it's supposed to be when the point's open. So I'll just zoom in so you can see the indicator. It's not real important, the numbers on the gauge at the moment. I'll relate them to you here. Okay, so first thing we want to do is find top dead center. So as you can see, when the piston goes down, the piston's going down, the dial moves counterclockwise, and as it comes up, it goes counterclockwise. So we want to see where the needle stops. I'm going to continue turning the fan the same way, and it doesn't matter which way I'm turning the fan at the moment. So, okay, there, if you noticed while I was talking, the dial was going clockwise, then it started to go counterclockwise. So now it's going, now it's going clockwise, and it goes counterclockwise. So that, where it stops and changes direction, is top dead center. The face of this gauge can be rotated. So we'll rotate it to put 0. Where the needle stops moving. And that is, I believe, top dead center. I'll just lock that face and then find out. Yes, the needle does not go past 0. So that's top dead center. Now, you may notice these two little clips here. These are indicators. The only thing I've used this dial indicator for actually is to measure top dead center and set the timing on these engines. So those should be set to indicate where the point should open. The manual states, and well, I better not try to quote it by memory because I have a terrible memory. Just a moment. So the manual states that the, if you can read it here, ignition timing before top dead center in inches and millimeters, the 9E, is 11/64 of an inch. That's what it says there. You know, it may be blurry. And with my calculator, I converted that to a decimal, which is 0.172. And there's a tolerance, give or take 15 thou. So 172. So on this indicator, and I keep standing in the light, just a moment. On this indicator, one complete revolution is 100 thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to rotate the engine backwards because the ignition should occur before top dead center. That's 100. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 72, and I'm probably upsetting the 0. Let me check I haven't disturbed the 0. I have disturbed the 0. Reset my 0. So 172 thousandths of an inch should be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, So that should be 30, 20, sorry, when this is on the 28, which there's also a red scale here, so that's 72. Clear as mud? Okay, so just bear with me. So we rotate the engine, the crankshaft backwards. 100 thou on the gauge, 110, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. It's at 70 now. So 172 thou. That is where the piston should be when the points open as the engine is rotated forward. So I'm going to rotate the engine backwards past that, about 18 thou. Then I'm going to connect up my test light. I've connected a battery to a LED clearance light, so when there's a complete circuit, the light comes on. We want to connect to the black wire for the forward set of points and a good ground, which is here. And perhaps I can set that up there where we can see it come on. So it should be on because the points should be closed right now. The points are not closed, so the timing is off a bit. So I just rotated the crankshaft backwards until the light came on. Now I'm just going to see where the light goes off. So the light goes off when the points open, and the light is trying to go off there. The light is off, and we are 5, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 8. We're out of the 15 thou tolerance. So what we need to do is adjust the position of the points plate. So I will set this closer to our 147 thou. Sorry, I don't know why that's stuck in my mind. It's 172 thou. And then I'll move the camera. This is the points, of course, and what we want to do is move the points so we change when the points open. Now, changing the point gap would affect when the points open relative to the piston position, but that would also affect our dwell and spark quality. So if possible, we don't want to change the gap to adjust timing. Now, we may have to later, but for now, both sets of points are mounted to a plate which is secured to this cover with 2 screws, and there are slots in the plate, so we should be able to, in theory, loosen the screws and rotate the plate with the points on it. Now, right now, the points are opening too early, so the timing is advanced. It's ahead of the timing is advanced. It's ahead of when it should be. So with the engine turning in forward direction, that's clockwise to us from this angle. So if we turn the plate clockwise, that will make the points open later relative to the piston position. So I'm going to use my screwdriver that fits these screws well, and actually that screw is already loose. The other screw is hidden up here. It's there. And the light is blinking as I touch the points with the screwdriver. So now I want to rotate that plate, and I think I'm going to find that the plate is not going to want to turn easily. There's a little bit of corrosion in here that I didn't clean up very well, so I'm carefully I think I'm moving things. change the bit in the screwdriver so it'll get in there and push without scratching things. Now, the indicator light is still connected, so as I get close, the light should actually come on as I get the points close. I need to tap that a little bit. I don't use too much force. On one, I'm just putting the square drive bit in the slot and tapping it. Have I made any difference? Looks like I've made some difference. I just rotated the engine and the light comes on at a different position. Actually, I'm going to try my snap ring pliers for this job. Actually, I found my needle nose pliers. Oh, they won't open wide enough, so I'm not going to use them. My snap ring pliers have a little bit more reach. So just the idea here is just to put the end of the pliers in the slots and rotate the plate gently instead of using a hammer. Okay, the plate definitely moved there. So I'm just going to do this. You can't see what I'm doing. Wow, the timing is way late now. So this is a adjust and check, adjust and check, adjust and check type deal. So now I have to turn the plate back. Carefully. Okay, the light blinked there when I was... Okay, so now when I check it, you can't see the light or the dial indicator because I'm focused on the points, but getting closer. So I'll set the dial to closer. Ignition points are, of course, an old method of producing spark for the ignition system, but they're a simple system that works. The drawback is, of course, well, there's a couple of drawbacks. First of all, the points get dirty and they don't work because they're not electrically connected, and adjusting them, they do wear, and adjusting them, as you can see, is a little bit fiddly. Wow, I went from just before where it should be to way past where it should be. So it's time consuming setting the timing. I'm getting warmer. It's still too early. Yeah, it is a little fiddly setting them, but the alternative is, of course, everybody wants electronic ignition, but that can be expensive. Now I've got the timing set too late, but I'm getting closer to where we want it. So again, we go back. My goodness. Okay, I think I'm really close there, so I'm going to tighten one of these screws down a bit. And of course, as you touch the screws, everything seems to move by a mile, at least according to the dial indicator. Yeah, that did move it. I had it closer than that, so we'll try closer than that. And just loosening the screw has caused the light to come back on. So, which way was I going? Okay, tightening the screw down caused the light to go back off. So the ignition timing is slightly early. Slightly early. Now, to be honest with you, it's within spec, but let's aim for perfect. Have I moved it too far? Well, let's tighten the screw. Okay. Tighten this other screw. And show you what I've got here. These just have to be tight enough to keep this plate from moving and keep from rattling out. Okay, so I'm just going to move the camera again. Bear with me, please. You can see the dial indicator now, and I'll just move the light so you can see whether or not it's on. Now, before we jump up and down that we've got everything right, I'm just going to go back to make sure that 0 is still top dead center. So it is. So rotate the engine backwards. 1 revolution of the needle is 100 thou. 120, 140, 160, 172 thou. I'm just going to go back past that till the light comes on. The light is on. So now as I rotate the engine in forward direction, this indicator here, this little black indicator, shows where 172 thousandths of an inch before top dead center is. And the timing, the light is going out, which would be when the spark occurs. Not where it was before I tightened the screws. So it is now opening 82 thou, 83 thou, 183 thou before top dead center. So that is within the 15 thou spec. But I'm going to see if I can get it closer, because I don't think we're going to be as lucky with the ignition timing for the reverse direction. Because both sets of points are on the same plate, once this timing is set for forward, we can't move the plate again to adjust the rear timing. We could, and hope that both, we've got the timing within spec, within 15 thousandths of an inch for both, but I would like to have the forward exactly right with the points set at what I believe is exactly the right gap, and then adjust the gap in the points to set the timing for the rear. As I mentioned, adjusting the gap affects the quality of the spark. And we want the quality of the spark for forward rotation best we can get, because that's where the engine spends most of its time running. We want it to run as well as it can in reverse, but fortunately, or hopefully we're not going to spend a lot of time running the engine in reverse. We may need to back out of ponds. Or if you're doing a 3-point turn, whatever, you might want to use reverse, but we want to make sure the ignition timing is set correctly for reverse. The gap we can adjust a little bit. So we're not going to be running full throttle in reverse. At least I don't run for full throttle in reverse. Okay, so back at what we just did here. We just adjusted the points plate. I rotated it clockwise to delay or retard the timing, and now the points are opening 0.02 of an inch late or early, pardon me. So just slightly early. And they are consistently, the light is consistently going out at that time. Well, I'm going to try to get it right on the mark. Loosen the plate screws again. Sorry, I'm bumping the camera here. The screwdriver's right in the tripod here. Screws are loose, so I need to rotate the plate a little wee bit more clockwise. Of course, the screws are loose, so it seems to change the way the plate is sitting and the way the points are sitting against the cam. Now the piston is above where it should be, so the light should actually be off, and it isn't. So we'll try that again. Adjust and check. Adjust and check. Did a little more. Tighten the screws. Oh, now I have it too late. Now I have it 2, 4, 6, 5, 6 thou too late. One more minor adjustment, I hope, gets it. So counterclockwise. Just a hair, and I probably can't see the amount I have to move it. Sorry, knocking the tripod again. Light is definitely on. Doesn't look like I moved it. Okay, I'm just going to shut the camera off here and adjust this one more time. So I adjusted it, well, I think maybe twice more or 3 times more, but anyway, what I've done is adjusted it until I've got it where I think I can live with it. Sorry, I did that too fast. So moving the fan in a forward direction, there's where the light should go out. The light is going out when the needle is 0.02 of an inch past the ideal mark. So it is slightly late, but well within specification. So that is our forward ignition timing set within spec and as close as I'm going to set it. So now we need to set the timing for reverse. So we'll put the piston back at top dead center. Move our wire for our light to our indicator light. Rotate the crankshaft forward 172 thou. I'm going by the same mark again. So now, as I rotate, oh, I've gone the wrong way here. Okay, so top dead center, I want to rotate the engine forward 170 some thou. So as I rotate the engine backwards, we want the points to open at the same mark. Points are still closed. We're 1, 2, so that's 5, 10. We're 15 thou late. We're 20 thou late. So I'm going to adjust the point gap.